Um, Thank you for coming to the first of many webinars I'm going to be hosting this year. The idea is that over the year, we will sort of evolve from learning about what other companies are doing and then practically how we can potentially put some of that into practice ourselves. From this session, so there's two different types of sessions that I'll run. One is like a research-based session where I'll show you use cases and give you context into a particular topic. And then generally the one running straight after that, that's the more practical one where I'll actually dive into some tools and I'll show you probably what I'm doing when it comes to like developing these processes. So in a couple of weeks' time, there'll be a webinar that we'll run, which will be about building a research agent inside something like Google Workflow Studio, or maybe in Manus or something like that. I'll figure that out. I haven't done that one yet, but I know what the topic is going to be, and I know the kind of thing that we're gonna tackle. But first, we're going to learn about agents, and we're going to learn what they actually are, what it means to be using agents. I'm sure some of you are probably already using some today, but what it could actually mean for you in your roles in the future as well. So bear with me. Let's work through this. I never like the slide for telling you what's going to come. So let's just jump straight into it. So what we're talking about here, if you've been in the world of AI at all, you've probably been at phase one, which is like the chatbot style experience. Going to ChatGPT or Gemini and you're asking a question and it's sending you back a response in text. And you're like, the transition to that for us from nothing before was absolutely huge. Like seeing the difference between not having AI and now having AI to help us and coach us and guide us in some of the stuff that we do. That was a massive shift already. Now I think the majority of us are working in sort of phase two, the co-pilot, where we've got where we've got our ChatGPT or whatever, maybe building something for us, or we're working in a platform like Asana that knows how to use that tool to actually, and AI to be able to say build subtasks for us, or inside our Gmail app, you know, the automatic replies. Like this is what we call co-piloting, and it's where something is specifically built inside an app that can help you solve a problem, like whatever that problem may be. And I think a lot of us now are sort of at that position. However, the next stage, and this year, if you don't know already, has been touted the year of the agent, and it's kicked off with quite some storm. I'll talk about that in a bit. But this is going to be about the year of that autonomous decision making and action doing. And so agents are execution machines, so they can go off and they can do things. So they can do multiple things, and they can do those in parallel, which makes quite a big difference to when we're thinking about things that marketing space. So like insights generation or personalization or content creation, and across different platforms, like all these different things, we can be assisted by agents. And I'll come on to how some other businesses are using those today. The adoption curve. So if we think about actually, one of my future slides, I think, says that now 91% of marketeers are now using AI very regularly in their day-to-day. However, by the end of 2028, Gartner is saying that 60% of businesses will have adopted marketing agents into their teams. And I think a number of those are going to be in this year. There'll be a significant number in the next year. And then I think it'll be refining and tweaking by 2028. Like, I would be very surprised if by 2028, a lot of the manual tasks that you do today aren't already being managed by one of your digital workers. And I'll come on to what that might look like on the next slide. However, what I just want to stipulate is if you are not already a first mover, so someone that is in this early adopter bracket, and you're not already considering building agents and you haven't necessarily got the workflows defined yet, you are not alone. We've recently hosted a few dinners with different CMOs, And it's very rare that we actually talk to anyone that has any sort of agentic process to actually create their marketing content. A lot of them today are still interfacing with a chatbot to get, say, content created or to run some numbers. So don't feel like you're running behind. But this year things will change. And if you're getting to the end of this year and you're still not thinking about agents and how that might be able to help you, or if you're not hearing it from other marketing leaders in your business about how they're investing in creating agents for you, well, then there's potentially something that you need to review, and there's an impact that we need to consider. What agents will mean for marketing teams is a lot less of the drudgery, a lot less of the continual copy and pasting, and a lot less of the repetitive work that currently takes place. A lot less of the localization, a lot less of the what email is next that I need to build, or where do I get these images from? How do I host these images? Where do I go in the platform to set up this email? Where do I go into the platform to change this ad? Many of those tasks are going to be done for us alongside the insights side. So actually the aggregation of the data post campaign, the checking of that data to make sure that obviously it's valid, and then showing us that data in the way that it makes sense for us. And I mean that, like, it makes sense for us rather than just this generic dashboard that everyone might see and filter on. These are the kinds of things that we can expect to come with sort of agents helping us in our teams. And yeah, as I said, 91% of marketers are now using AI in their day-to-day, which is a big uplift from last year of 63%. 73% of teams that have actually adopted agentic AI into their workflows have seen an uplift in how much they're able to deliver. And 50% of teams leveraging AI are getting more work done, or being able to reduce their SLAs and therefore potentially be able to deliver more. That might be an additional language, it might be an additional product line, it might be just extra nurturing content, or maybe considering other channels. But that time being freed up means that there's more opportunity for that team to focus on other avenues that they haven't been able to do before. And yeah, 75% of AI users report higher job satisfaction, which is a really good number, right? That could be higher job satisfaction because they're able to do more creative decision making and they're much less repetitive tasks. It could be higher because actually maybe they've got a bit more time, they feel a lot less stressed in their day-to-day, and therefore sentiment is better, and generally that means that you have a better output, more creative output, which is quite an important skill for this role. How are agents used? I will come on to physically what agents are and what they're made up of, etc. But generally they're used in more places than this. This is where you'll see them first. You will have potentially already interfaced with some agents when you've been dealing with like support services. That could be support services for products. Like if you message Amazon, you'll get Rufus telling you about what the product is and how it works. If you message Adobe, I'm sure they have got agents. They've got their own agent platform for building chatbots. But actually, from a marketing perspective, these agents, just if we're thinking about support happens all over the place, right? Support isn't just when someone sends you a complaint or when someone sends you a request. A support agent could be something that helps sales teams determine what these people have been doing from a marketing perspective. Why is this lead even on their desk? And they have an interface to be able to chat with that person's history, for example. Support could be for other teams, so for other teams in the business that need to interface with marketing, how do they actually get things through your operational life cycle, for example? So don't just be thinking that support agents are purely to deal with customer support tickets. They do very well there as well, though. Another one is the content supply chain. So automating content creation from the inception, the brief, through to actually having that live in platform. And agents can pick up a huge amount of that. I've got a couple of examples of that in this deck, actually. And then finally, the strategic analysis. So that whole number crunching, the bit actually that many marketers actually find quite challenging. We should see quite a big uplift in the sort of data understanding and data literacy, thanks to AI being able to do a lot of that sort of back end crunching for us on our behalf. And what that should mean is that campaign performance actually increases because we're able to make a difference based on data that potentially we weren't able to crunch ourselves before. So these are three places where I see agents probably making an impact for us in 2026. What is an agent? So how does an agent actually work? So if we think about an agent, this is like a campaign brief agent. And an agent, I would just say, is not one thing, right? It could be slightly different from system to system to system. It could be more of a process that takes place. But generally, modern agents are some kind of overarching, if you imagine this like a hierarchy, I should say, something that takes the request, splits that request into many different sub-requests, which get handled by experts. Much like if you were briefing a team, and when people are talking about agents, they often talk about it going from when you're interfacing with a chatbot, you're interfacing, maybe give you a bit of support. You're interfacing with something that's a co-pilot, like you're offloading a little bit of work maybe to a contractor. But like this, and what agents are, they should be considered pretty much digital employees or teams, is generally the sentiment that people are talking about now. And it's really about offloading big chunks of work and giving that agent the autonomy to actually deliver on that big chunk of work. And so what they do is they have this agent that sits at the top, which breaks the task down into many subtasks. And in this case, we've got a campaign brief agent that breaks it into the content that needs to be developed, how we actually develop that content, and then QAing and delivering that content. And you'll notice below that, there's even further agents that actually do specialized tasks. And this is generally how the majority of agentic systems now are working. And this is, if you get delivered an agent by your business, is how I would expect that to be working. So yeah, it's all about breaking down big tasks into smaller ones that these experts can solve, rather than trying to solve everything all at once. Let's talk about how this actually looks like in practice. So this is what traditionally might happen now in a marketing team. We have a brief, and this, by when I'm talking about now, I'm talking about still leveraging AI. I'm just talking about not using agents in this process. So we have a brief, we upload that brief to ChatGPT, we get it to break it into subsections for us. Maybe we get it to coach us on what segments we should be targeting. Maybe we even get it to start creating some content for us. But each of these actions is like a manual repeat step. So for each segment, I'm going to ChatGPT or Gemini and I'm saying, create me the marketing content for this based on my brief. Now create me the next one, now create me the next, now create me the next one. I'm copying all this stuff out and I'm putting it in a document. It's just this manual repetitive work, right? And then I've got to do that for all my different segments, and I combine all that together, and then I need to get that into an email template. Like, it's all manual work, high potential for things to shift as we run these requests through AI. So I'm sure that you've all experienced it. The more you talk in the same chat to an AI chatbot, generally the further it will drift from the original brief that you received it. And by the time you created the 30th bit of content here, it's probably quite significantly different to the first bit of content that you developed. Whereas with an agent, a lot of this is going to be handled, right? I'm going to tell the agent what it can do and how it can do it. And that is part of the agent configuration. I'm then going to upload a brief to that agent, and then the agent is going to take every action beyond that. Because it knows what templates we have, and it knows, based on the brief that I've specified, the type of content I need to be produced, it's going to basically spin off, like we saw on this slide, multiple content agents for the different pieces of content that need to be developed and run those all in parallel. It's then going to make decisions based on that content about the segments that we need to target, or actually we'll probably do that before, what segments we need to target, what content we need to produce, and then it will package all that up in the assets that I actually want this to be sent into. And it's only at the last stage, or if it needs help at any point throughout that process that I would get involved. And what that means is, by giving this agent the controls to work within and the ability to work within it, it's able to actually produce this like content supply chain, as we called it earlier, end to end. And this kind of stuff is happening already. Like, this isn't uncommon. Well, actually, I guess it is quite uncommon at the moment, but I think by the end of this year, some of these tasks are going to be managed for us, especially when it comes to the code generation that we might need for our emails, especially when it comes to that upfront copy generation that we might need, to create assets in different languages with different stages of the funnel potentially. Yeah, I expect many of these different tasks to be handled, and over time, these will all these different agentic steps will come together and form basically what this workflow is. That end to end, you upload a brief and you deliver on this. I work in the coding world quite a lot, and already when it comes to code, I can upload a brief, I could set my agent off overnight, and it will basically build me an entire X or Y product overnight, and it will just keep going and iterating based on what I've provided it up front. This is already possible. There's no reason why this wouldn't be possible for a marketing use case. And in fact, I've just redeveloped this weekend. I redeveloped the Algo website, and now we've got that in the hands of another copywriter who's taking a look at it. So it's totally possible. One of the first use cases I wanted to share was just like this in practice and what this means for a particular brand. So L'Oreal, you may know the brand L'Oreal. They obviously have a huge number of products, and every single one of these products needs to be like have marketing delivered for it. And traditionally, this would mean that they would have to limit what they could possibly do by the amount of time that they had to actually deliver on one of these products and the return that it might mean for them, which meant that they were not targeting many particular localized regions. All of their content was actually in English. They would generate, well, they would actually go to photo shoots and create the images of their products at those photo shoots, which again was timely, costly. And then they would need to share that across the marketing team for them to actually be able to use it. What they're doing now instead is they get high-res image or a few high-res images, and they use imaging to create good-looking product shots. They then load those into VO, so VO2, which then turns them into videos that they then share on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter, or maybe X, whatever it is. Well, I say automatically, they've got human in the loop review, but the human doesn't get involved other than from the initial step to upload the brief and what generally this campaign is trying to achieve, through then the final step where they just check that the campaign makes sense and looks good. They're now able to create 100 times more content than they were ever able to before. They have reduced the content time that it took them to develop by 60%, and they're now able to serve 36 markets, whereas before they were serving, well, they were probably serving 36 markets, but they were not localizing the content into those markets and therefore having a better impact. So the case study is there if you want to see it. That's all built on Google Cloud tools and technology using Vertex AI. I also spoke to the head of content from TUI. He came to one of our roundtables that we hosted last week, actually. And they're doing this as well, but they're using VO 3.1. And the majority of the video that you see from them at the moment is using VO 3.1. And they have a team that basically grades the video. So because the video looks too perfect, they have a team that make it look slightly less perfect, so it seems more real, which I found quite interesting in that conversation. Why are we talking about agents so much all of a sudden? So you may have seen in the news or heard on one of your social platforms about this tool called Claudebot or Mossbot or OpenClaw. It's now called OpenClaw. Before that, when it was all blowing up, it was called Claudebot. What this is it's a proactive agent that just sits on your machine and does stuff for you passively. And this is what I love about agents. When you have an agent set up that actually does stuff on your behalf, and it can react for you without you having to even be involved. This came out of nowhere. It meant that many of the different players in the market, Google, OpenAI, Claude, they all developed the same tooling that OpenClaw or ClaudeBot released to basically keep up with what this agentic market is. But what people are doing with this tool is they are basically running businesses from scratch. They are having it interface. I don't know if you saw, but there was something called Claude Book. And it was basically like Facebook, or it was basically like Reddit, but for agents, and the agents would communicate on there, and you would basically run up a continual process where the agent would just be like having conversations with other agents and determining how to do a better job at what it does, and sharing lots of personally identifiable information of the people that had set those agents up. So risks, there are big risks. But it meant that individuals, which wasn't possible before, could actually have their own personal custom agent. So I've got one of these running on my machine. What it does for me, I support my partner's like tech for her business. What it does for me is it basically every day scours the internet for new topics that are related to her business, creates a landing page for me that I can basically piggyback off of someone else's content. It then sends me that on Telegram, and I can approve it on Telegram to get it built onto the website. And so this agent, all on its own, without my input, other than approving the post, is going off and it's doing these things. And this was the big differentiator for this. Actually, I think I might have a slide on this. One of the big differentiators for this was that this agent has got a persistent memory. So this agent would basically learn what I do and start like repeating those actions that I do. It has, as I talk to it, it will learn from what I talk to it about, and it will create subtasks and sub-processes that it can repeat, that then mean that I'm not having to retell it to do everything that I've already told it to do in the future. It's got automation built in, so I can say run this every day at 10 o'clock, or I could even say every 5 minutes, go and do a task for me, go and look at my emails, go and see if there's something that I need to have replied to, or something that needs to be put into Asana. And it can actually go off and it can do these things. This is the big difference between purely having something like a co-pilot that might read something and maybe send you a message, as opposed to actually fully autonomously going off and doing something. One of the huge differentiators for this tool, and one of the things that is now extending into, if you've got a ChatGPT subscription personally or with work, there's a tool called Codex that you can download onto your machine, which gives you access to this same tool stack now. And if you've got Claude, the desktop app, you can also do this. You can run these automated workflows that happen. And the same with Google Conductor. So there's a tool called Google Conductor that they recently released that lets you also do this sort of automated running of these agentic processes. The other thing is skills and sub-agents. These systems, all of these, Claude, Codex, OpenClaw, Conductor, they're all able to create skills. And what these skills are is it's like a set of instructions that this agent is going to use whenever it does that task. So one skill for you might be, this is the skill that we use when we localize our content. And that describes how we localize our content. And then the next skill might be, this is how we change our imagery so that it looks good across all these different platforms. And maybe it uses Nano Banana 2 to do that. And the next one might be, this is what our HTML email looks like, and this is how we generally do our HTML email stuff. And one of the really nice things about these platforms now is that you can say, with those three skills, run this skill first, run this skill second, run this skill third. And what it means is these long-running tasks can now happen. Whereas before, it was much harder for these long-running tasks to happen. You basically had to have a developer to sit there and code all this together. But now you can get your agent to go and do 3 things, 10 things in a row, and leave it running for a long period of time, making its own decisions based on the skills that you've provided, which makes a huge difference when it comes to like creating these processes that compound. All of these things together mean that we've made quite a big shift recently in how we can actually have AI working on our behalf in the background without us having to go to it and tell it what to do next. And those are just like some quick examples. I've got some more examples later on, some different agentic processes that you could try, probably a bit easier. But OpenClaw is a really, really interesting one. Maybe watch some YouTube videos if you're interested in like how agents are working. Some people are literally running their business on that tool, and it's bringing in. Other people give the agent money and say, I want this to be doubled by the end of the week, and it will go off onto the web and it will literally try and double that money. Sometimes it will just stick it on red and it will lose. Other times it will actually like create content packs, create a website, start creating a social profile, and it will literally be trying to get this out into the market. Obviously, AI slop, end of the internet, etc., etc., etc. So,
yeah, it's a good question. And Claw, you have it installed in your personal computer.
I did have it installed on my personal computer. Then I got worried because I saw what was happening with other people's personal OpenClaw accounts, where it would share exactly who they are, where they lived, what they did if you hit the wrong website. So one of my slides later is about trust and about what you need to consider. I would not suggest installing OpenClaw on your local machine. There are a ton of guides out there how you can get it running on this service called Cloudflare, which will basically let you run your own version of this tool in a sandbox environment where it's not going to. Because one of the risks with it at the moment is that if I say to my OpenClaw, go to the web, go and research this new topic. If someone on their website was putting malicious code on there that basically told my agent to forget everything it ever knows, apart from all the personally identifiable information about me, that could basically get my agent to tell them everything it knows about me. And obviously, because I'm not controlling the website that my agent goes to, I can't control if it was going to give away my details, which is why you should be running these things in sandbox environments where it doesn't have access to anything about you specifically. It's just got access to the tool that it's running in.
Awesome. Thank you.
When I did have it running on my computer, that was quite useful because I could say to it, I haven't got any disk space left. Tell me what's on my machine that we can delete, and it would go off and it would delete it. So there were some benefits.
Yeah.
The risk is too high, in my opinion.
That's the thing that I think it makes sense to have it on your computer, but anyway, there is always like a risky little thing. But I think it's much more productive when you have it on your computer, that you have your everything living in there and it knows and it learns from you. But it's just a matter of preference, I suppose.
And I think with everything, these things will generally get more secure over time. Just at the moment, it's relatively experimental. So and there have been lots of cases where people have lost things because their agent has just told somebody what their banking details are, even like crazy stuff. I thought this was a really nice agentic use case, maybe something to consider. So Pernod Ricard, I had no idea who this company was. By the way, I made this deck through an agentic process, which I'll come on to later. But they were a company that I hadn't heard of before. However, I have ingested many of their products. They produce Absolute. They produce many different whiskies. They are like a big alcohol brand, 200 different brands. Obviously, you can imagine in the world of some like a substance that maybe not everyone agrees in, there is quite a lot of potentially good things about these brands, but obviously quite a lot of bad things. And what this company in particular wanted to do was try and increase the sentiment and how likely, in a good, positive way, their brands would show up in AI searches compared to other brands. And so they built an agentic process that would send requests into LLMs, all different LLMs, bring back the responses, determine if those responses were positive or negative, find gaps in their brand in LLMs. They would then use LLMs to actually create the content that filled those gaps. They would get those into what do they call it? major publications, different channels, so that they would then be collected by the LLM in the next run when it learns from the content on the web, and then they would be seen more favorably. And they were basically doing this fully autonomous. So they were finding gaps, creating recipes that use their products, getting those onto food blogs and websites, and creating their own using LLMs to fill the void where there wasn't enough talk about their particular products. And this was a fully always on process. And it meant that they were spending their budget differently, actually. So traditionally they would spend their budget on paying influencers to create stuff on their blogs. They didn't necessarily need to do that as much anymore. And yeah, they were able to do this for all of their brands, which is again like something that many businesses actually struggle with, is when they manage to try and scale things to multiple brands, because this was a streamlined process that would work regardless of what you put in the top and what you put out at the bottom. It meant that they could do this across all brands. So again, another good read. However, when you're working with agents, you do need to be controlled. And I've sort of alluded to many of these things when we were talking about OpenClaw. But obviously AI is prone to hallucinations. It still is prone to hallucination, less than before. Yes, it is still risky to run OpenClaw in a sandbox. Hallucinations, they still happen. You probably have actually had a hallucination happen in the last 2 weeks if you're still using AI, I'm sure. Safety of the brand, you do still want to have human in the loop before anything actually goes out from an agentic point of view, just to make sure that it is like a predictable response. And actually there are things that we can do, I'll talk about that, to stop agents from going off and doing their own thing constantly. Agents are stochastic, so we can't actually know exactly what it's going to produce in the other end. Even if we tell it to produce something in an exact way, we can't guarantee that that's actually going to happen without having some additional logic and checking. And sometimes agents can go rogue and they can do something you don't want them to do. And that's happening more often than ever by people giving them more access and more power than they've ever had before. And actually for them being smarter than they've ever been before. Agents are now able to use tools much easier. They're able to identify tools. What do we do though? We add in guardrails. So if you've ever used Alba, that is one of the tools that we have at Algo. It's in Slack. If you do /Alba, you will get to interface with a tool that has guardrails. And what I mean by that is if you send it a question, so if you send Alba a question like, how do I get paid? It will go off to our tool. The LLM will pick which one of the answers we have is most relevant to your question, and it will pick that one, or it will tell you, sorry, we don't have that answer. What we're not doing is generating stuff on the fly and running the risk that actually you're going to get an answer that's either hallucinated or is something that is not what we want you to hear, is maybe giving you the wrong information. You can also have human in the loop. So before you finish any process, Alba, that tool is called, if you do /Alba in Slack. Human in the loop, get stuck in, get the agent to check with you before anything happens. And actually, if you've interfaced with a coding agent, this happens all the time. Like generally things don't happen without it confirming with you that yes, this plan looks good. Yes, this feature looks good. Shall we push it to production? Yes, let's push it to production after we've done testing. That generally happens now. It will happen with these more human-based agents that we'll be developing this year. We need to have observability. We need to know why the agent has made its decisions. And finally, we want generally to have these agents running in sandboxes where they don't have access to tools that they shouldn't have access to, or data they shouldn't have access to, or permissions that they shouldn't have access to, because we do run the risk of them going rogue, as I've sort of given a couple of use cases of that. Another quick use case was from Adecco. Adecco is a massive recruitment company. they have started using agents in their sourcing process. So if you are going for a job with Adecco, maybe you've already interfaced with this, but they will receive a job request. They will automatically bring that job request into their system, and they're actually using Salesforce Agentforce to do this, which is like quite a generalized agentic system inside Salesforce. They'll do autonomous outreach. They'll message people with that job spec based on the data they hold against individuals to say this is a job that we have available. If they meet the criteria, they'll have an automatic interview with them, an agentic interview with them, and they'll also be scored agentically as well. There are, I would say, some gray areas in this particular use case. I think the EU, as part of the EU AI Act, if you haven't seen it already, says you aren't actually able to score individuals using an AI process. So maybe this use case will go away, something to consider. Before then, getting a human involved to do the handoffs. So setting up that next phase interview and bringing in that human element. Personally, I would say I probably wouldn't enjoy an agentic interview. I probably wouldn't enjoy being scored by a robot in particular. So I think there are other ways of doing this potentially, but this is just another way that another big business is implementing AI into their workflow. Do have a look at the AI Act. I did actually build a website on it. I'll try and find that and I'll share it with people. What it tries to do is, based on your role, show you why this AI Act that's happening in the EU might impact you, even if you're not in the AI, in the AI. Even if you're not in the EU, it still impacts you just like GDPR impacts you today, I'm sure. A recap, moving from prompt-based, which is what some of us probably are still doing today, where we send a prompt into our model, to a co-pilot model, where we work with something to actually get something done for us, creating our subtasks, or inside Gemini, create me a formula and automatically put it into a column for me, to then the more agentic way. So a proactive system that's actually doing stuff based on some criteria that you've provided, letting it make some decisions and letting it take those actions on your behalf. And yeah, there's the roles across the bottom there, like the prompt, you're the driver, you initiate, you guide, you start every one of these processes. The co-pilot, you're the captain, you set the direction and it goes off and it does it for you. And then the agent, which is basically you're the manager, you're saying this is some work for you to do, please crack on, come back to me when you're done. Where do we start with this? Because this is quite hard, right? This whole topic is relatively massive, and it could mean that you've entirely changed the way that you deliver content, or you create content, or you analyze data. Some easy places to start are actually with much smaller tasks. Actually, some of the tools that you might have already been using today enable you to create agentic processes, maybe not as powerful as the ones that maybe you see people do with OpenClaw, or maybe you see people using Claude to do, or as my daughter now calls it, Claudia. So I'm now going to call Claudia Claudia from now on. Where do we start? We can start with a broken process, and that broken process could be that we have data going into multiple systems, or maybe we can just automate that data in one place, or maybe we have to upload our images in a certain way to some service. Maybe we can batch that now using some kind of agentic process. And I think on some of my other webinars, I've covered like different use cases of how we could use Google Workspace Studio or some AI tools to create some little web apps for us that help us like automate some of these tasks. Or maybe we can use it to open up a new channel that we haven't had before. So if we're already doing marketing content to 8 languages, maybe we could go to 9 now that we have the ability to create these more automated processes. Or if we're already doing communications to SMS, maybe we actually extend to WhatsApp because we're able to sort of hit that channel as well. Or maybe we transform a moment. So we take an existing process that already happens and then we actually determine how we can make that better. And we have a little bit of time to be able to deliver a better experience before then maybe we can roll that out in some other areas. I've got some more use cases later that you might be able to pick up on. What does this mean for you guys? So like this shift generally in moving towards agents, because these like I use agents a lot. Like I'm trying to, as much as I possibly can, make everything code so that everything that I do can be done by a coding agent. And it means that I'm just, as I put here, like I'm the architect and I'm just saying, this is the kind of thing that I want delivered. Can you please go and do the first iteration for me and then bring it back to me? And that's exactly what happens with these slides. So the slides that you're looking at, I have an agent. This one happens to be in Manus, that every 2 weeks looks at the calendar 2 weeks beforehand, looks at the calendar, creates the shape of what this deck should look like, sends me the first draft, and then I make amends, and then it will go off and it will make changes to the deck, and we'll refine that over the 2 weeks before the webinar. The same, and this is going to happen for every one of these webinars, so I apologize if they all start to look the same. Maybe I'll see what I can do to judge it up. But we are going to be moving from these general doers and executors to architects, people that actually help describe what the task is and why the task is important, and what bits you should focus on, which bits you shouldn't. Then we've got the specialists, so the people that have specialist knowledge on a particular topic. I'm sure you all know much of this specialist knowledge is now known by AI tools, and that particular specialism isn't necessarily going to do you any favors in 5 or 10 years' time. So you're going to become the orchestrator. You will have specialist knowledge, but you'll also hopefully have some specialist knowledge of your co-workers and your team and generally what they do. So you're able to execute tasks across a broader set of skills within that function. And then you've got the manager, the person who manages people and schedules, and project manager, basically. And these people are going to be basically ensuring there is a high quality that's being produced by these agents, and that they are able to handle the exceptions that come up, and how to actually deal with that, whether it's another process, knowing when to stop an agentic process and actually pick it up with humans. Probably going to be quite a big sort of skill set for people to learn over the next couple of years. And this is generally what it might look like for an orchestrator. So they will have a number of different agents that they will work with day to day to complete their tasks. A research agent, a content agent, analytics, and a service agent, all basically helping them deliver their roles. And the nice thing is that if they are able to make these agents good enough, these agents can be running 24/7, as opposed to this person that unfortunately has to sleep for 8 hours a night, probably, unless they're Elon Musk and they go crazy for only sleeping 4 hours a night. Sorry if there are any massive Elon Musk fans in my house. So key takeaways. Agents is quite a big topic to tackle, so I apologize if I've either gone into too much detail or this just feels too lightweight. I'd love to have some feedback, by the way, so I can tailor the next sessions as well to just try and make them as relevant as possible. But yes, we are moving beyond chatbots. So beyond just sending a chatbot a message and getting a response, that is still a use case, by the way, that you should be doing day to day. Like I still do that day to day. I don't use an agent for everything. It's not necessary for everything. But when you are repeating the same processes into a chatbot, there is a much better process. There's a much better way of us dealing with that longer term. So when you have these repetitive things that you do, you should be writing them down, sending them over to me, and maybe I could build something for you. I could coach you on how to build it yourself. Trust is so important for these tools. So you need to trust not only that the output that you're going to get from these tools is good, otherwise you'll stop using them. And to do that, you need to put the time in and invest the time up front to actually make sure that these tools know exactly what they should be producing and what good looks like and what bad looks like. But also trust from what you give it access to, because the more that these models determine that there are other ways that they could help you, the more they might engage in that area and actually do something that you've determined that they shouldn't be able to. And those OpenClaw examples earlier of like it just betting all the money on red and thinking that that might be a good way of it doubling the money because it's like a 50-50 chance, is maybe not something that you want to risk. So again, setting those guardrails when you're considering these agents is quite important. Share of model. So this is like the example of the Pernod one. What I really like about this is like passive, I like to call it passive AI. So things that are just happening in the background, things that you can set and forget, things that just happen to run when without you having to trigger it. And that's one of the big changes that's happened since OpenClaw was released. It was like these natural things that would just be happening without you having to be involved. I don't know what else I was going to say on that one. And then, yeah, finally starting small so that you already have access to some tools. One of the tools that you have is Google Workspace Studio. If you're a company that doesn't use Google Workspace, I think all the ones that we work with do actually use Google Workspace. Then there is Manus. If you want to use Manus, like maybe I won't go over there already. Let's talk about Google Workspace Studio. What could you possibly do in Google Workspace Studio that's like an agentic process? If you're in a role that requires for you to know things like what are your market dynamics, what's the micro, macroeconomic things that are happening inside your market, what are your competition doing, what are the things that people are talking about on social media, if these would benefit you in your role, then you can already go into Google Workspace Studio and write an agent that will go off and find all these information, all these bits of information for you regularly and bring that into a place where you might read it. That's basically what we're going to build next week, in 2 weeks, sorry. Or you could do some passive document processing. So as someone uploads a document into a Google Drive folder, maybe there's a process that happens after that. So you could take the content out of that Google Drive document, translate all of that content into different languages, and then stick that into a Google Sheet, for example, or stick it into the next place where it might be managed. The Google Workspace Studio is a bit limited at the moment in terms of its tool stack. They've removed many of the tools that were once there when it was first released. However, they will come back, and by having these sort of foots in the door, it will really help you in like being able to move to that next stage of Agentic when you get there. But if we think about what I said Agentic was earlier, it's these multi-stage processes that you're not necessarily having to trigger. It's just happening. And you can do that in Workspace Studio. The other one is Manus. Like if you want to get a real experience of what Agentic looks like, you should spin up a free Manus account. And if you've got a friend on the call, you can ask them if they've already got a Manus account, because then you'll get free credits and they'll get free credits. But what this tool does, they call it a generalist agent, and it will do many things for you. So I use it, for example, for this presentation. Manus goes off, researches the web around this topic, finds me many different sources, and then builds me a slide deck without me having to be involved. And this happens now every 2 weeks before the next call. And it feels like magic, right? It feels like utter magic that it's able to go off, do all this research, know what the next step is, ask me any questions if it has any questions, but it just keeps on going. And this is very much what it feels like to have one of the coding agents if you aren't using those. Like it feels like magic. You should try Manus if you haven't already. Manus can do other things for you. It can build websites. It can do large research topics. So one of the other agentic workflows I have in Manus is we have probably, well, I know we have 71 different job roles that we generally source for. What I needed to know was how much all 71 of those roles would cost us for the London market. And so I got a Manus wide agent, they call it, to go and do 72 different individual tasks, to go and research 5 different websites to determine what the average going rate for these different roles was. And that's another thing that you can do with Manus that just feels truly magical, like going off and doing probably 500 different individual tasks to get me the information that I needed. And all it did was just stuck it in a spreadsheet. Again, it was just like magic. So do try Workspace Studio to create a simple research agent if you've got time. If not, we'll probably dive into that in the next 2 weeks, unless I find a better version of that kind of use case. but do try Manus, because I think it's like, it is your first dip in the water to what Agentic actually means. And give it something that is like a more than one task at a time. So here's my Excel spreadsheet, turn this into 20 different emails for me. Or even, it's great, by the way, for images. If you go in and say, create me 10 different versions of this image, actually spins up a canvas, creates all 10 versions of that image, and shows you all 10 on one canvas. Whereas if you're doing that with Nano Banana 2, inside the Gemini interface, it's like one at a time. So just these more agentic tools that will do many steps for you are really, really useful. Next week, oh yeah, some things that you may wish to read. HBR, stuff in and around AI. They have basically a white paper on preparing your brand for agentic AI. Some of the stuff that's in here today was from that. So the move from chatbots to Copilot to the agentic was their kind of workflow. Gartner trends for 2026 is very much heavy on AI, obviously. And then if you're slightly more technical, or if you want to know where this agent stuff really started from, it was a tool called LangChain. Might be something interesting to read on what building reliable agents looks like. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be holding the practical track, as I've sort of mentioned a few times, which is building your first agent. And it will be, I'm sure, a research agent, because those are one of the easiest to get started with, and everyone has a use case around needing some research in some shape or form. And to do that, we'll probably be using Google Studio and GEMS and NotebookLM, I would imagine. But I haven't quite got around to figuring out what that will look like yet. Yeah, Amy, this is Manus. For Manus, I've got a skill. So when I was talking about skills earlier around like having these repeatable processes, my skill in Manus knows exactly how to make slides that look just like this. My other skill in Manus knows exactly how, when I send in some random garbled text about what the case study looks like, how to build an entire website that looks gorgeous for our case studies. Apologies if you can hear my phone ringing. That, I think, is everything that I have got to show you today. We have 3 minutes left if anyone has any questions. I haven't actually read these discussion points. I apologize. So if these are something that you want to talk about, then we can too. Amy.
I think my biggest blocker, not just as a contractor with a company, but even when I was with other companies, and I think you addressed this a number of times, our organizations are untrusting of AI and agents, and they get scared, and so there's not a lot of opportunity to practice, get hands-on experience, but yet my feed is full on LinkedIn of people who are doing all of this stuff, and I'm like, can I come work for your company? Because I would really like to have the opportunity to build this. And I don't have, even if I were willing to put down my own credit card and subscribe to Manus and and other Claude and other tools, now I'm worried about my own data being exposed from my desktop. I don't have an environment where I can practice, I think is the best way to put it.
But in my opinion, it's all about starting small. Like, it's all about creating these micro processes that build into something bigger. And that helps build trust over time. And if we think about it, right, we think about an enterprise business. Every enterprise business has quite, well, I say every, I'd like to think most, for them to be enterprise and big, they have structured processes that teams have to follow, with probably documentation that are repeatable. And this is like the perfect place for an agent to work in, because there's already these considered structured processes that you know what good looks like, and you know what bad looks like, and you know what the ins and outs should look like. So I think for businesses this year, they are going to need to invest in this to be relevant next year. Well, that's probably a bit strong, but I think they will. But I think getting started small is the place to be, with the tools that you have access to. So if you've got AppScript, which sits behind all your spreadsheets, you can already do some really cool automation and then show people this cool automation, and you can be thinking and talking about what this might mean if we had something doing this always on and you weren't having to press this button. If you've got Google AI Studio, This is basically the place where triggers happen, and you can say, when this thing happens, do this thing on my behalf. And yes, it's a bit limited at the moment, but it's a start. At the very least, research rate in that tool. Yeah, I get the challenge though. Like to be honest, I can't solve that challenge either. And I don't think going rogue and buying your own Claude is the right thing to do. And I know a lot of us wouldn't even be able to run that on our machines. However, that like getting yourself prepared for what you might be provided by someone else is probably also a good space to be in. So like testing Manus on your own machine. Like Manus, by the way, is super cloud. Like Manus doesn't necessarily know much about me. It's just very, very good at actioning my work related tasks. Where the real risk comes in, Amy, is like when you're doing OpenClaw, which might have access to everything on your machine, personal and work related, and access to your web browser. Like at some stage, I said to OpenClaw, yes, you can use my web browser as you wish. And obviously that meant that it also had access to all my sites. And if I'd already got my password saved, like it could log into. So yeah, the risk is huge once you get something literally running and living on your machine. But when it's in the cloud, like it's much more manageable. I'm sorry, I'd love to say yes. Let's get cracking with this Agentic tool. Cool. Well, thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate it. And hopefully that was useful. I'm someone that loves feedback, whether it's good or bad, because I like to make sure that I'm actually bringing something that's relevant. So please do feel free to send me or anyone else that you know on this call some feedback that then maybe they can send to me or whatever. But I will make changes based on your feedback. So yeah, thank you for coming, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.